The recording was only 37 seconds long, but it was enough to destroy Adrian Cross, expose a Maryland state senator, and place every family in my neighborhood at risk. I did not know that when I pressed the red button on my phone. All I knew was that Senator Richard Caldwell had spent 6 months promising to revitalize Riverside, and every promise came with another eviction notice taped to someone's door. The Cross Foundation Gala was being held 42 floors above downtown Baltimore, inside a ballroom where the windows stretched from polished marble to the ceiling and made the city look small enough to own. Below us, Riverside was barely visible beyond the harbor, a cluster of aging brick buildings, corner stores, church roofs, and narrow streets where families had lived for generations. Up there, men in tailored suits discussed those streets as if they were empty squares on a board. I was supposed to be carrying donor packets between the registration desk and the private reception room. That was what my temporary staff badge said. Claire Bennett, event assistant. It did not say freelance reporter. It did not say daughter of the woman whose apartment building had been sold without warning. It did not say I had spent 3 weeks searching public records, following shell companies, and finding the same name behind nearly every transfer. Cross Development Group. Adrian Cross. I had seen his face in business magazines before that night. 36 years old. Self-made, according to the profiles. Ruthless, according to former partners who only spoke off the record. He had bought hotels, shipping terminals, office towers, and entire blocks of downtown property before most men his age finished deciding what kind of life they wanted. The city praised him because he donated to hospitals and schools. Riverside feared him because people with that much money rarely noticed neighborhoods like ours unless they intended to change them. The ballroom smelled like white roses, expensive cologne, and champagne I could not afford. A string quartet played near the stage while donors laughed beneath chandeliers shaped like frozen rain. I moved through them with a silver tray pressed against my hip, pretending not to listen. The vote is Thursday. Caldwell has the committee lined up. Once the residents are relocated, construction can begin by fall. Relocated. That was the word they used. Not removed. Not displaced. Relocated, as if my mother, Mrs. Alvarez, the Wilson family, and every child at the Riverside Community Center were pieces of furniture someone could move into storage. My hand tightened around the tray. Then I saw Senator Caldwell leave the ballroom. He slipped through a velvet curtain near the service corridor, followed by 2 members of his security detail. A few seconds later, Adrian Cross followed him. He walked without hurry, but people moved aside before he reached them. He wore a black suit with no tie, his white shirt open at the collar, his expression unreadable. He did not look like a man who needed to announce his power. He looked like the reason other men lowered their voices. I should have stayed at my station. I knew that. My supervisor had already warned me twice about leaving the registration desk. But I thought about the notice on my mother's kitchen table. 30 days to vacate. I thought about the children at the community center asking whether the building would still exist after summer. I set the tray on an empty table and followed. The service corridor was colder than the ballroom. The music faded behind the heavy door until only the hum of the ventilation system remained. Caldwell's security detail waited near a second exit farther down the hall. Ahead of me, a private conference room stood partially open, a blade of amber light cutting across the carpet. I heard Caldwell first. "You are in no position to dictate terms to me." Adrian answered in a low, controlled voice. "I am giving you one opportunity to walk away." My phone was already in my hand before I consciously decided to use it. I opened the recording application and pressed the red circle. The timer began counting. 1 second. 2. 3. "The Riverside plan has already been approved," Caldwell said. "You signed the preliminary agreements yourself." I signed what I needed to sign. "Then honor them." Silence followed. Not empty silence. The kind that makes the body recognize danger before the mind understands why. Adrian spoke again. "Withdraw your support from the project." Caldwell laughed softly. "Or what?" I stepped closer to the door. My pulse beat so hard that I could hear it in my ears. Adrian's answer came without anger. "That made it worse. Or I will bury everything you built before sunrise." My thumb almost slipped against the screen. Caldwell's voice sharpened. "Is that a threat, Mr. Cross?" "It is the last warning you will receive." 17 seconds. 18. 19. I stared at the moving sound waves on my phone. This was proof, not rumor. Not another anonymous source refusing to speak publicly. A powerful chief executive officer threatening a Maryland state senator behind a closed door. I should have stopped recording and left. Instead, I stayed. Caldwell lowered his voice. You think those people will thank you? Adrian replied. They do not need to know my name. They will lose those buildings either way. Not while I have the power to stop it. The words made me pause. My certainty cracked for half a second, but anger filled the space before doubt could grow. Powerful men always knew how to make themselves sound noble. They called control protection. They called ownership responsibility. They called neighborhoods investments until the people living there could no longer afford to stay. Caldwell said something I could not hear. A chair scraped across the floor. I stepped back and ended the recording. 37 seconds. Caldwell left through the second exit with his security detail. I slipped the phone into my jacket pocket and turned toward the ballroom. That was when I saw Adrian. He stood 6 feet away, framed by the cold blue light of the corridor. His eyes moved from my face to the pocket where I had hidden my phone. He did not look surprised. He looked disappointed, as if I had confirmed something he had hoped was not true. I forced my shoulders straight. I got lost, I said. It was a terrible lie. His gaze held mine. Dark. Calm. Impossible to read. No, he said quietly. You found exactly what you were looking for. My mouth went dry. He took one step closer, then stopped, leaving enough distance for me to walk away. That restraint frightened me more than a raised voice would have. Give me the phone, Miss Bennett. Hearing my name made the corridor tilt beneath me. How do you know who I am? Your name appeared on 3 public record requests reviewed by my legal department. You were tracing companies connected to Riverside. He knew about my investigation, but not because he had been following me through the city. My questions had reached his lawyers before I had reached him. Then you know why I was recording. I know why you believe you were recording. His eyes flicked toward the ballroom doors, then back to me. Do not release it. Are you afraid of what people will hear? No, something shifted in his expression. Not fear. Something heavier. I am afraid of what they will never get the chance to hear. I pulled out my phone and held it against my chest. You threatened a senator. Yes. And you expect me to protect you? This is not about protecting me. His voice dropped until it was almost lost beneath the ventilation hum. If that recording becomes public tonight, Caldwell will know which part of my plan has failed. I wanted to demand names, documents, and proof. Before I could, the ballroom door opened behind me, releasing music and laughter into the corridor. Adrian looked past my shoulder. His face went still. Someone had entered the hall and retreated before I could turn. He leaned slightly closer without touching me. Walk back into the ballroom, he said. Act as though you heard nothing. And whatever happens next, do not let Caldwell see your phone. I walked back into the ballroom with the senator's name burning in my mind and Adrian's warning pressed against my spine. The string quartet had changed songs. Champagne glasses still glittered beneath the chandeliers. People still laughed as if entire neighborhoods were not being traded behind closed doors. I forced my mouth into something that might have passed for calm and returned to the registration table. My hands remained steady until I saw Caldwell near the stage. He was speaking with a television reporter, his silver hair perfect, his expression warm and practiced. When his eyes found mine, his smile remained, but something behind it sharpened. He knew I had been in the corridor. He might not have known what I had heard, but he was trying to decide. I lowered my gaze and reached beneath the table for my phone. Adrian stood across the ballroom, surrounded by donors and city officials. He did not look at me. That frightened me more than if he had watched every movement. I opened a message to Marcus Reed, the attorney who had helped Riverside fight 3 eviction cases without charging a dollar. Marcus and I had already been tracing the property purchases for 2 weeks. I attached the recording and typed one sentence. Keep this somewhere safe. The progress bar moved slowly. Caldwell began walking toward me. 10%. 20. 35. He stopped to shake a donor's hand. 52. My heartbeat climbed into my throat. Adrian turned his head at last. His eyes moved from Caldwell to me, then dropped toward my hands beneath the table. 78. Caldwell came closer. 91. The message disappeared from my screen just as the senator reached the desk. Miss Bennett, he said, reading my badge as though we had never seen each other. Are you enjoying the evening? I am working, Senator. Of course. His gaze settled on my jacket pocket. Riverside Community Center, is that correct? You listed it on your staffing application. Every nerve in my body went cold. You read staffing applications? I take an interest in the people supporting my events. He leaned slightly closer, still wearing his public smile. Especially people from neighborhoods facing difficult transitions. Transitions. Another clean word for losing everything. Riverside is not transitioning, I said. People are being pushed out. His smile weakened. Across the room, Adrian stepped away from his conversation. Caldwell noticed. He straightened and adjusted his cuff. Development always creates discomfort before opportunity. Whose opportunity? I asked. For 1 second, the kind senator disappeared. His eyes hardened. Then Adrian arrived beside us. He did not touch me. He did not raise his voice. He simply occupied the space until Caldwell had to acknowledge him. Senator, Adrian said. The mayor is waiting near the stage. Caldwell glanced between us. We were having a useful conversation. It is finished. The words were quiet, but Caldwell left. Adrian watched him cross the ballroom before turning to me. You sent it. It was not a question. You had your lawyers monitor my research. I had them monitor threats to the Riverside acquisitions. People asking questions are not threats. Neither is information until someone gives it to the wrong person. I expected him to demand the phone again. Instead, he looked toward Caldwell and said, Leave through the kitchen. Do not go home by your usual route. That sounds like another threat. His jaw tightened. It is advice. From the man who threatened a senator. From the man who knows why the senator is smiling. Before I could answer, my supervisor appeared and told me my shift was over. Adrian had already walked away. I left through the main entrance because I refused to let him choose my door for me. That decision felt brave for exactly 28 minutes. Then Marcus called. Wind rushed around me as I crossed the hotel plaza. Claire, where did you get this? Tell me you saved it. I saved it in 3 places. But you need to slow down. The recording proves a threat. It does not establish the context. The context is Riverside. Possibly. The recording also gave me a company name I had not connected before. I checked it against the property files we already collected. His voice changed. Cross Development purchased your mother's building. I stopped beneath a streetlight. What? Not only her building. The building that houses the Alvarez Bakery. The community center. Most of the east side of Mercer Street. The purchases went through separate limited liability companies, but they all lead back to Adrian Cross. The city noise faded until all I could hear was my breathing. Send me everything. By morning, the documents covered a folding table in the Riverside Community Center. Deeds, mortgage assignments, tax records, corporate registrations. Every page carried a different company name, but Marcus had drawn red lines between them, and every line ended at Cross Development Group. Mrs. Alvarez stood beside me in her flour-dusted apron, staring at the deed for the building where her family had operated its bakery for 38 years. He owns the building, she whispered. A Cross subsidiary purchased it from your former landlord, Marcus explained. Your lease still exists, but Cross controls the property. Word traveled quickly. By noon, nearly 40 residents had crowded into the center. Fear became anger. Anger became questions I could not answer. 3 black vehicles stopped outside. Adrian entered alone while his drivers and security personnel remained on the sidewalk. He wore a charcoal coat over the same white shirt from the gala, as if he had not slept. The room fell silent. Mrs. Alvarez stepped in front of him. Did you buy the building that holds my bakery? Adrian looked at her, not at me. Yes. A murmur moved through the room. Did you buy my mother's apartment building? I asked. Yes. Did you buy this center? Yes. He did not soften the truth. He did not hide behind a lawyer. That honesty only made me angrier. You stood in that ballroom pretending to protect Riverside while you already controlled half of it. Adrian placed a folder on the table. Read the lease amendments. I have read enough. No. You have read the transfers. Read what came afterward. Marcus opened the folder. His eyes moved quickly across the pages. These freeze residential rent increases for 7 years, he said. Adrian nodded. They also extend the commercial leases and give current tenants the first opportunity to purchase their buildings at values assessed before the redevelopment announcement. The room quieted. I searched his face for satisfaction. There was none. Why hide it? I asked. Because Caldwell has been directing donors and private developers to purchase distressed properties throughout Riverside. I acquired the buildings, mortgages, and purchase options before they could. If he knew which properties were protected, he would target them through inspections, insurance pressure, and zoning enforcement. You expect us to believe you bought our neighborhood for our own good? No, he said. I expect you to examine the agreements. Sirens sounded outside. Someone near the window shouted that smoke was rising from a city records annex 2 blocks away. Marcus went pale. The archived Riverside inspection files and title abstracts are stored there. I ran before anyone could stop me. The winter air cut through my jacket as I crossed Mercer Street. Smoke rolled above the annex roof, dark against the afternoon sky. People gathered behind a safety barrier while emergency crews secured the block. The old inspection reports were inside. So were documents connecting Caldwell's donors to a series of questionable property violations. I moved toward the barrier, but a hand caught my arm and stopped me before I stepped into the street. Adrian released me immediately. Do not touch me, I said. The emergency crews are handling it. The evidence is inside. Copies may exist. Not of everything. I tried to move forward again. He stepped into my path. You cannot help anyone by entering an unsafe area. And you cannot protect everyone by giving orders. A firefighter directed the crowd farther back. Adrian guided Mrs. Alvarez away from the smoke before returning to me. He removed his coat and placed it around my shoulders. I do not believe this was an accident, he said. I wanted to throw the coat back at him. Instead, my fingers found something stiff inside the inner pocket. A photograph. I pulled it out. The image was faded at the edges. A young woman stood in front of the Riverside Community Center more than 4 decades earlier, smiling beneath the old blue awning. She had Adrian's eyes. On the back, written in careful ink, were 6 words. Evelyn Cross. The last place we belonged. The photograph changed nothing, and that was exactly why it frightened me. A dead mother, a faded awning, 6 handwritten words. It was the kind of evidence that reached the heart before the mind could object. I looked from the picture to Adrian, searching his face for the satisfaction of a man whose secret had finally been discovered. He only held out his hand. That belongs to my family. I kept it. Your family owned the community center? No, his eyes moved toward the smoke above the records annex. My family needed it. Emergency lights washed Mercer Street in red and white. Residents stood behind the barrier with their coats pulled tight, watching decades of public history disappear into smoke. Adrian guided the group back toward the center, but I walked beside Mrs. Alvarez instead of following him. I refused to let one photograph rearrange everything I knew. Powerful men understood stories. They knew a childhood tragedy could make ownership sound like mercy. Inside the center, Marcus spread the lease amendments across the folding table while Adrian stood near the old radiator. The room smelled like wet wool, coffee, and the faint smoke clinging to our clothes. I placed the photograph between them. Explain it, I said. Adrian looked at the image for several seconds before speaking. My mother was 17 when her family lost their apartment on Fulton Street. Her father worked at the shipping yard. Her mother cleaned rooms at a downtown hotel. They paid their rent on time for 11 years. Mrs. Alvarez lowered herself into a chair. Adrian continued. A redevelopment company purchased the block. The residents were told that the building required emergency repairs. They were given 10 days to leave. Who owned the company? Marcus asked. Caldwell Urban Partners. My stomach tightened. The senator? His father, Richard Caldwell, was already working for the company. Adrian touched the edge of the photograph with one finger. The community center helped my mother's family find temporary housing. She volunteered here after school. She said it was the first place where losing an address did not make her feel invisible. His voice remained controlled, but his hands told a different story. One thumb pressed against the side of his index finger repeatedly, as though he were holding something in place. What happened to them? I asked. Temporary housing became 3 years of moving between relatives and weekly motels. My grandfather lost his job because the new bus route added nearly 2 hours to his daily commute. My grandmother became ill. My mother left school and began working full-time. He looked at me. Caldwell's father built luxury apartments where their home had stood. The radiator clicked behind him. No one spoke. I thought about my mother's eviction notice. I pictured the younger version of Evelyn Cross standing beneath the blue awning, smiling before she learned what money could erase. Why did she write that? I asked. Adrian read the words from memory. The last place we belonged. She gave me the photograph when I was 12. She made me promise that if I ever gained the power to stop the same thing from happening to another family, I would use it. His eyes shifted toward the windows. She died last year. Sympathy rose in me, immediate and unwanted. I pushed it down. So you bought Riverside. I bought the properties and debt Caldwell's group was targeting. Without telling anyone. Public disclosure would have exposed the acquisitions before the protections were in place. You keep saying secrecy protected us. I stepped closer to the table. But secrecy also protected you from questions. Marcus looked up from the contracts. Claire. No. He has a tragic story. That does not make every decision noble. Adrian met my anger without retreating. You are right. The answer stopped me. I had expected a defense, not agreement. Then show us everything, I said. Every contract, every company, every signature. He nodded toward the folders. You have the acquisition files. Marcus turned another page. His expression changed. Not everything. He pulled out 3 preliminary redevelopment agreements and placed them side by side. Each carried the cross-development seal. Each allowed demolition to proceed after final zoning approval. At the bottom of every page was Adrian's signature. The documents had been signed 4 months earlier. These agreements allow the buildings to be cleared, Marcus said. Mrs. Alvarez gripped the edge of the table. My bakery too? Marcus did not answer. He did not need to. I looked at Adrian. You said you were protecting the properties. I am. Your signature says otherwise. Those agreements are tied to conditional transfer documents. I laughed once, without humor. That is what men like you always say when the paper finally catches up with the promise. His expression hardened. The properties are covered by deeds and mortgage assignments held in independent escrow. If cross-development loses control of the project, defaults on the protected properties, or receives final demolition approval, the escrow agent must transfer the buildings and debt to a community preservation trust. Where are those documents? Marcus asked. My outside counsel holds certified copies. The escrow company holds the originals. Why are they not in this folder? I asked. Because these are the documents Caldwell was allowed to find. A cold realization moved through the room. Adrian had shown Caldwell agreements that made it appear cross-development intended to demolish Riverside. The actual protection existed somewhere else, hidden behind legal conditions no resident had seen. Either Adrian had built a shield around the neighborhood, or he had created the perfect story after being caught. Convenient, I said. Produce the certified copies. I will. Now. My board is already questioning the acquisitions. I need my outside counsel to release the documents directly to the residents, not through cross-development. Another delay. A safeguard. That is what you call every decision you make without us. Mrs. Alvarez gathered her papers with trembling hands. I need to open the bakery, she said. People will be frightened. They will need coffee. She left before anyone could stop her. One by one, the other residents followed. Trust had entered the room as a possibility and left as a question. When only Marcus, Adrian, and I remained, Adrian reached for the photograph. I placed it in his hand. Your mother deserved better, I said. So do we. Pain crossed his face so quickly that I almost missed it. Claire, do not give Caldwell that recording. You no longer get to tell me what to do. This is larger than your opinion of me. That is the problem. You think everything is larger than the people whose choices you take away. I walked toward the door. Marcus followed me into the hallway. Outside, the winter light had begun to fade. I sent him the original audio file rather than the compressed copy from the gala. Secure it, I said. Do not publish anything. What are you planning? I need proof that Adrian is lying. Marcus looked through the glass doors toward the folding table, where Adrian stood alone with his mother's photograph. And if he is telling the truth? I hated how long it took me to answer. Then I need proof of that too. Marcus placed his hand over his phone. I know a title attorney who can verify the signatures and confirm whether an escrow agreement exists. Give me until tomorrow morning. I nodded. That night, I remained at the center, scanning every contract Adrian had left behind. At 2:17 in the morning, my phone lit up with a message from Marcus. I opened it expecting documents. Instead, I saw 6 words. I am sorry. I had no choice. Before I could call him, every television in the center switched to a breaking news report. Senator Caldwell stood outside Baltimore City Hall, promising a public investigation into corporate intimidation. Then the audio began. Adrian's voice filled the room, cold and unmistakable. The recording had been edited. His words about protecting Riverside were gone. Only the threat remained. My phone rang. Adrian Cross. I answered, but he spoke before I could. Marcus gave the recording to Caldwell, he said. I heard reporters shouting behind him. And now Caldwell knows you are the witness. The worst part was not hearing my evidence turned into a lie. It was realizing that Adrian had known Marcus was vulnerable before I did. Where are you? He asked. His voice remained calm, but the silence behind it felt crowded. At the community center. Lock the front door. People are already outside. Through the windows, I saw camera lights gathering along Mercer Street. Reporters moved toward the entrance while neighbors stepped onto their porches, confused by the sudden attention. On the television, Caldwell called Adrian a threat to public trust. He spoke slowly, choosing each word with the care of a man arranging furniture in a house he expected to own. Claire, listen to me, Adrian said. Do not speak to the press until I arrive. You knew Caldwell had approached Marcus. He did not answer quickly enough. You knew, I repeated. I learned about the approach after you sent Marcus the recording. And you thought that justified not warning me? A warning would have changed Marcus's behavior. Caldwell might have withdrawn before exposing his connection to the project. I gripped the phone harder. So you watched him use me. Once I knew he had the file, I chose not to interfere. The room seemed to narrow around me. You allowed him to take it. I allowed Caldwell to believe the edited recording would protect him. Releasing it connects him publicly to Riverside and creates grounds for an investigation. That was my voice. My evidence. My decision. Yes. His answer came quietly. And I took that decision from you. Outside, someone knocked against the glass door and called my name. You used me as bait, I said. I used Caldwell's certainty. Do not change the sentence. My words came out low and sharp. You used me. He was silent. That silence was the first fully honest answer he had given me. A reporter struck the door again. I crossed the room and pulled the curtain closed. You need to leave, Adrian said. There is a service exit behind the kitchen. No, Claire. You do not get to move me around your board anymore. This is not a board. Then stop treating people like pieces. I ended the call. 3 minutes later, the first news van parked beside Mrs. Alvarez's bakery. By sunrise, my face was on every local station. Some reports called me a whistleblower. Others called me an accomplice. One network displayed a photograph from the gala and described me as an activist with secret ties to Cross Development, even though I had never met Adrian before that night. Caldwell's office announced that I would be asked to testify at an emergency city oversight hearing. Cross Development stock dropped after the market opened. At 8:30, the company's board suspended Adrian pending an internal review and froze all discretionary spending connected to Riverside. Within an hour, 2 lenders suspended the credit lines supporting the properties. That sounded like a corporate problem until Marcus appeared at the center and explained what it meant. He looked as if he had aged 10 years overnight. His coat was unbuttoned. His eyes would not remain on mine. The spending freeze stops repairs and operating payments, he said. The lenders can also demand additional collateral. Mrs. Alvarez stood behind the counter, pouring coffee for residents who had nowhere else to gather. What happens to the leases? She asked. They remain valid. And the buildings? I asked. Marcus swallowed. If Cross Development defaults and no transfer protection exists, the lenders could begin foreclosure proceedings. Caldwell's companies would be waiting to bid. Anger arrived so cleanly that it made me calm. What did he promise you? Marcus flinched. Funding for the legal clinic. A seat on the State Housing Commission. Access to people who could change policy. You traded us for a better chair. I thought the recording would stop Cross. You never asked what stopping him would do. Marcus looked at the floor. Neither did you. The words landed because they were true. I had heard a threat and built the rest of the story around it. Adrian had hidden the truth. Marcus had sold it. Caldwell had edited it. But I had been the first person to decide that 37 seconds were enough. Before I could answer, Adrian entered through the front door. This time, no one moved aside. Residents stared at him with fear, anger, and exhausted suspicion. He wore the charcoal coat from the records annex, but the authority that had followed him into the gala was gone. His board identification card was gone. So were the people who usually waited beyond every doorway. He placed a thick envelope on the counter. These are certified copies of the escrow agreement, the conditional deeds, and the mortgage assignments, he said. Marcus reached for them. Adrian stopped him with one look. Claire reads them first. I opened the envelope. The documents listed every property Cross had purchased and every mortgage his company had acquired. Beside each address was a transfer condition. If Cross Development lost control of the Riverside project, defaulted on a protected loan, or secured final demolition approval, the escrow agent was required to transfer the property or debt to the Riverside Community Preservation Trust for $1. The beneficiaries were not investors. They were the current residents, tenants, and local business owners. Mrs. Alvarez covered her mouth. This means the neighborhood can become ours. If the conditions are triggered and the court enforces the agreement, Adrian said. Yes. I turned another page. The signatures were notarized. An independent Baltimore escrow company had acknowledged receipt months earlier. Why sign the demolition agreements at all? I asked. Because Caldwell needed to believe I was cooperating. Final approval triggers the transfer before demolition can occur. So the agreements were a trap, a shield disguised as a weapon. The phrase should have impressed me. Instead, I looked at the people around us, and none of them knew. Adrian's eyes moved across the room. Knowledge would have placed them under pressure before the documents were secure. You keep saying that. I placed the pages on the counter. You keep deciding that ignorance is safer than consent. His expression tightened. Caldwell controls inspectors, lenders, donors, and members of the zoning committee. I did what I believed was necessary. Necessary for whom? For Riverside. Riverside is not a map. I pointed toward Mrs. Alvarez and the residents gathered behind her. It is people. People you protected without trusting. People you tried to save without asking whether they wanted your version of salvation. No one spoke. Adrian looked at me as though the room had disappeared and only the distance between us remained. The legal protection can still work, he said, but the certainty had left his voice. The archived records are damaged, but the escrow documents survive. Caldwell exposed his interest. The trust can petition the court. And Marcus? I asked. You knew Caldwell had approached him. Yes. You could have told me. Then Marcus would have noticed your behavior change, and Caldwell might have disappeared behind another company. So you allow me to trust him? Adrian's jaw shifted. Yes. The word was barely audible. Something inside me opened, not with fear, but clarity. Adrian had saved homes. He had preserved leases. He had placed his company in danger to keep a promise to his mother. None of that erased what he had done to me. Good intentions did not turn manipulation into respect. I stepped close enough that he could not mistake the steadiness in my voice. You protected my neighborhood, I said, but you never protected my right to choose. He held my gaze. I was trying to protect you from Caldwell. You were trying to protect your plan. The room went still. There is a difference. For the first time since I had met him, Adrian had no answer. I copied the original recording from my phone onto an encrypted flash drive and placed it in my pocket. His eyes followed the movement. That file can clear me, he said. Possibly. It can expose Caldwell. Not by itself. What are you going to do? I walked past him toward the door. Reporters were still waiting outside, hungry for a hero and a villain. They would receive neither from me. Not yet. I looked back once. I am going to find the truth without becoming another piece in your plan. I left him standing in the center of the neighborhood he had protected, surrounded by people who no longer knew whether to thank him or fear him. 2 days later, when the city council opened its emergency oversight hearing, everyone expected me to save Adrian. The reporters expected it. Riverside expected it. Adrian might have expected it, even though he never said the words. I had the complete recording in my pocket, clean and unedited, and one press of a button could prove that Caldwell had hidden the most important part of their conversation. But clearing Adrian was not the same as exposing the system that had placed our neighborhood on an auction table. I had spent too long mistaking one piece of truth for the whole story. I would not make that mistake again. I spent the night before the hearing inside Mrs. Alvarez's bakery with cold coffee, property maps, tax records, and residents who refused to go home. The ovens were dark, but the room still smelled like cinnamon and warm bread. Mrs. Alvarez organized every lease Cross Development had amended. Mr. Wilson brought 12 years of inspection notices from his apartment building. A retired accountant named Patricia Lewis traced donations from Caldwell's political committee to the companies purchasing property around Riverside. Every document led to another name. Every name led back to the senator. Marcus arrived shortly after midnight. No one welcomed him. He stood near the door with a cardboard file box in his arms and shame written across his face. I brought everything, he said. I did not move. Everything you gave Caldwell. Everything his office gave me. He placed the box on the nearest table. Inside were emails, draft zoning requests, campaign schedules, and copies of messages between Caldwell's staff and private developers. Marcus had exchanged my recording for access. Caldwell had given him more than he realized. Why should we trust this? Mrs. Alvarez asked. Marcus looked at me. You should not trust me. Verify every page. That was the first honest thing he had said since the gala. We worked until sunrise. I compared timestamps. Patricia checked corporate registrations and campaign filings. Marcus explained which records he could authenticate personally and which required confirmation from public agencies. A city clerk verified the zoning drafts. The escrow company confirmed the dates on Adrian's transfer documents. At 6:15 in the morning, I found the message that changed everything. It came from Caldwell's chief of staff to Harbor Renewal Partners. The message instructed the company to delay its bids until Cross Development's Riverside credit lines had been suspended. A second message discussed using coordinated inspections to declare several buildings unfit after the properties entered foreclosure. Caldwell had not merely planned to purchase the neighborhood. He had planned to empty it through code violations, financial pressure, and public fear. Adrian had been right about the threat. He had also been wrong about the people. Riverside did not need one powerful man keeping secrets for us. We needed proof we could carry into the light ourselves. Adrian called at 7:30. I answered on the bakery's back steps while the sky turned pale above the rooftops. My attorneys say you have not responded, he said. I am not working with your attorneys. The hearing begins in 2.5 hours. I know. The complete recording could stop the board from using Caldwell's accusation against me. It could also restore confidence in the escrow agreement. It could save your company. It could protect Riverside. Only until the next powerful person finds another way around you. Silence settled between us. I could hear traffic on his end and the faint murmur of voices, probably lawyers trying to rebuild an empire before breakfast. What do you need from me? He asked. It was the first time he had asked instead of telling me. I need Caldwell unable to do this again. Then release the recording. No. Not first. His breathing changed. Claire, the recording proves what you said. It does not prove what he built. If I lead with it, the hearing becomes a fight over whether you threatened him. Caldwell will make you the entire story, and Riverside will disappear behind your reputation. You may not receive another opportunity. Then trust me. He did not answer. I almost laughed at the justice of it. He had demanded trust while withholding every choice that made trust possible. Now I was asking him to step into uncertainty without control. I will see you at the hearing, I said. Baltimore City Hall was surrounded by cameras when we arrived. Reporters called my name from behind metal barriers. Caldwell entered through the front doors smiling, one hand raised as though he were greeting voters at a parade. Adrian arrived 3 minutes later in a dark suit without his usual staff. His board had officially removed him as chief executive officer that morning. For the first time since I had known him, he entered a room without controlling anything inside it. The council chamber was packed. Residents filled the back rows. Business leaders and attorneys filled the front. Caldwell sat beneath the city seal with his counsel beside him. Adrian took a seat at the opposite table. There was an empty chair next to him. I walked past it. I sat with Riverside. Caldwell testified first. He described Adrian as an unstable executive using wealth to intimidate public officials. He called the redevelopment plan compassionate, necessary, and fair. Then his attorney called me as a witness. I carried the flash drive to the table and raised my right hand. Caldwell smiled when I sat down. He believed I had come to destroy Adrian. Miss Bennett, his attorney began. Did you secretly record a private conversation between Senator Caldwell and Mr. Cross? Yes. And did Mr. Cross threaten the senator? Every camera turned toward me. Adrian sat motionless across the chamber. He did, I said. A murmur moved through the room. Caldwell's smile widened. His attorney requested permission to play the edited recording. I allowed him to do it. Adrian's voice filled the chamber. Withdraw your support from the project, or I will bury everything you built before sunrise. The recording ended. Caldwell's attorney turned toward the council. There can be no reasonable dispute about what we heard. There can be, I said, because that file was edited after Marcus Reed transferred it to Senator Caldwell's office. I placed the flash drive on the desk, but did not play it yet. Instead, I lifted the first document from Marcus's box. This is an email from the Senator's Chief of Staff to Harbor Renewal Partners, dated 3 weeks before the gala. Caldwell stopped smiling. The council chair confirmed that the document had been submitted to the clerk and marked for authentication. I read the instruction to delay bids until Cross Development's credit lines were suspended. Then I presented the draft inspection requests, shell company registrations, campaign donations, and proposed foreclosure schedule. Some records were public. Others were authenticated by Marcus when he entered the chamber and took the oath. Each document moved the story farther from Adrian and closer to the truth. Caldwell's attorney objected repeatedly. The council chair allowed the evidence into the hearing record subject to further legal review. Marcus admitted receiving promises from Caldwell's staff. He admitted transferring my audio. He identified the official who asked for an edited version. Caldwell stood. This witness obtained private materials through deception, he said. Her testimony should be stopped. The council chair struck the desk with her gavel and ordered him to sit. When Caldwell continued speaking, 2 members of the city sergeant-at-arms staff moved closer to preserve order. Adrian rose from his chair. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. I looked directly at him. "Do not intervene," I said. His eyes locked onto mine. "Trust me." Every instinct in him fought the request. I could see it in his shoulders, in the hand pressed against the edge of the table, and in the silence that had once made powerful men step backward. Then Adrian did the bravest thing I had ever seen him do. He sat down. I turned to the council chair and handed her the flash drive. The complete recording includes Senator Caldwell saying that Riverside would lose its buildings regardless of public approval. It also includes Mr. Cross refusing to allow that to happen. The full audio played. Caldwell's voice filled the chamber. "They will lose those buildings either way." Adrian answered, "Not while I have the power to stop it." No one spoke when it ended. The sergeant-at-arms staff returned to their positions. Caldwell was not arrested. There was no dramatic command and no instant punishment. Instead, the council chair ordered that the complete record be referred to city ethics officials and the Maryland state prosecutor. Investigators seated near the rear of the chamber continued taking notes. I looked across the room at Adrian. He had lost his position, endangered his company, and surrendered control of the plan he had built in secret. Yet he did not look defeated. He looked like a man hearing silence for the first time and finally understanding that it did not belong to him. Caldwell did not leave the chamber in handcuffs, and that mattered more than the headlines made it seem. Powerful men rarely fell in a single moment. They lost ground one document, one witness, and one exposed lie at a time. The council suspended the Riverside redevelopment approvals before sunset. The Maryland state prosecutor opened a formal inquiry the following morning. Harbor Renewal Partners withdrew its pending bids by the end of the week. None of it felt like victory yet. Victory should have sounded like music. Instead, it sounded like phones ringing inside the community center and frightened residents asking whether they still had homes. Adrian's transfer documents could not take full effect until a court recognized the preservation trust and ordered the escrow company to release the deeds and mortgage assignments. Cross Development's board challenged the arrangement, arguing that Adrian had exceeded his authority and transferred valuable assets without proper approval. Adrian had lost his executive position, but his signature remained on every agreement, and the same directors who once praised his decisions now called them reckless. He could have negotiated his return. He could have traded Riverside's protections for control of the company he had built. That was what the board proposed. I knew because Adrian insisted that the negotiation take place at the community center with the provisional community trustees present. 3 days after the hearing, 6 attorneys entered in dark coats carrying leather folders. Adrian came behind them with no folder at all. Mrs. Alvarez placed coffee on the folding table and charged each attorney $2. No one asked for a receipt. The meeting lasted 4 hours. The board offered to restore Adrian as chief executive officer and protect his remaining voting control if he abandoned the escrow agreement and allowed Cross Development to sell the Riverside properties at market value. The sale would stabilize the company, restore investor confidence, and return him to the office 42 floors above the city. Adrian listened without interrupting. Then he looked around the room. Ceiling tiles were stained from an old leak. Children's paintings covered one wall. A space heater clicked beneath the window. His mother's photograph rested beside the attendance sheet. "Honor the transfer," he said. His lead attorney leaned forward. Adrian, this offer expires today. Then let it expire. You may permanently lose control of the company. Adrian glanced at me, but he did not ask what I thought. He had finally learned the difference between respecting another person's choice and asking that person to approve his own. The company was supposed to give me the power to keep one promise, he said. If I break that promise to keep the company, then the company has no value to me. The attorneys left without finishing their coffee. 2 weeks later, a judge recognized the Riverside Community Preservation Trust and ordered the escrow company to release the conditional deeds and mortgage assignments. The apartment buildings, commercial properties, vacant lots, and secured loans Adrian had acquired transferred to the trust for $1. Mrs. Alvarez became one of 7 elected trustees. So did my mother. So did Mr. Wilson, Patricia Lewis, and 3 other residents chosen during the loudest meeting Riverside had ever held. Adrian received no seat. He had written that condition into the trust agreement himself. The neighborhood would belong to the people who lived and worked there, not to the man who had protected it. Caldwell resigned from his committee assignments while the investigation continued. Marcus surrendered the position he had been promised and gave investigators every message he had received. He apologized to me in the bakery one rainy afternoon. I believed he regretted what he had done. I did not pretend that regret repaired trust. Some things required more than sorrow. Some required time and repeated proof. Adrian understood that before I explained it. He disappeared from public life after the transfer. Business reporters claimed he had gone to New York, London, or somewhere along the coast. He was actually 12 blocks away, working from a small rented office above a hardware store. I discovered that by accident when Mrs. Alvarez asked me to deliver a box of property records. He had traded glass walls and private elevators for a narrow staircase that creaked beneath every step. His office contained 1 desk, 2 chairs, and his mother's photograph. You could afford something better, I said. He looked up from a stack of legal forms. Better for what? Making people believe you still matter. A quiet smile touched his face. I am trying to need that less. Over the following months, he built a non-profit organization that helped neighborhoods create community land trusts before developers could purchase distressed properties and mortgages. He did not place his name on the door. He did not appear in publicity photographs. He did not call reporters when the first family kept its home. That was when I began to understand that change was not one dramatic sacrifice. It was the decision to make a different choice when no one was watching. Spring arrived slowly. Trees along Mercer Street opened into green. Mrs. Alvarez repainted the bakery sign. The community center replaced its leaking roof with money from a neighborhood repair fund, not a private donation. At the first public budget meeting, every chair was filled. People argued about sidewalks, rent reserves, playground repairs, and whether the old Records Annex lot should become affordable housing or a grocery store. Adrian stood at the back near the door. He had been invited to explain financing options, but when the discussion began, he remained silent. Months earlier, his silence had controlled rooms. Now it made space for other voices. I watched him take notes while Mrs. Alvarez interrupted Mr. Wilson for the 3rd time. No one lowered a voice because Adrian Cross was present. No one stepped aside. He looked more at peace than he ever had beneath the chandeliers. There was an empty chair beside me. I moved my coat and rested my hand on its back. Adrian noticed, but did not approach. He waited. That small hesitation carried more meaning than every command he had given since the night we met. I nodded toward the chair. He crossed the room and sat beside me, not at the front, not behind a private table, but among everyone else. Is this forgiveness? He asked quietly. No, I said. His expression did not change. He had learned not to demand a softer answer. I looked at the budget pages in his hands, then at the residents raising their voices over the future they finally owned. This is where you begin earning it. He nodded once. No promises. No declarations. Only understanding. After the meeting, we walked along Mercer Street beneath strings of lights the bakery had hung between the buildings. My mother waved from her apartment window. Children raced past the community center doors. Adrian stopped beneath the blue awning from his mother's photograph. She would have liked this, he said. She would have told you that you took too long. He laughed softly. It was the first sound I had ever heard from him that carried no calculation. I did not know what we would become. Trust did not arrive like lightning. It returned like a neighborhood rebuilt by hand, slowly, imperfectly, one honest choice at a time. Adrian had once believed power meant standing at the head of every table. He lost that place and discovered something greater beside me. He had ruled the city through silence. Riverside taught him to listen. When he finally stopped trying to own the future, we made room for him inside it.